Out of the Zelda games I've played, my favorite is undoubtedly The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. But its story blows. There's not much sugarcoating it, honestly. It's just super poorly done. The plot's pretty bad, the lore is mediocre, and the way they go about telling the story is just outright atrocious in pretty much every way. It's really disappointing to see how hard they fell flat here. I can't even tell if they just weren't trying or if they really somehow actually thought they had something special here. They did not. But I do suppose I have to give them credit where credit is due. There were some good parts in Tears' story. Draconification, for example, had good build-up and great execution with Zelda's heart-wrenching sacrifice. And they had Ganondorf Draconify as well in the game's climax so that it served as more than just a one-off excuse for Zelda to get back to the future. Unlike Raru's Secret Stone Imprisonment Sacrifice move that wasn't built up beforehand or explained properly or used multiple times, making it pretty much just a blatant plot device to get Ganondorf to the future and check off the mandatory Demon That Was Sealed Away requirement that every Zelda game has to meet for some reason. Seriously, Zelda games use this trope a lot, and it is getting old. Tears didn't even bother trying to spice it up a little. Its usage of it is the most cliche out of any of them. But none of this even matters, because for the player to care about this, they have to actually follow the plot, which is difficult when they don't give you the bulk of Tears' story content in the main quest. You have to do the entirely separate Dragon Tears quest to find most of this game's actual main story. All the main quest gives you is a single cutscene repeated 4 times in each dungeon, with the only difference being different characters each time. It takes until dungeon number 5 before they start giving you actual information, and even then it's mostly just a more in-depth showcase of the events the last 4 cutscenes blabbed on about, along with a summary of stuff you'd learn through the Dragon Tears anyway. Also, if you were like me and you thought the geoglyphs were just some boring research quest your first time through and ignored them, then you're missing so much context for this game because you don't get that story stuff then. But even if you did pay attention to the geoglyphs, guess what? They give you this part of the story out of order. They show you the cutscenes in a random order depending on which geoglyphs you find first. Why? Because it's what they did last game, and Nintendo executives have internal beef with the people in the writing department. That's why. The lead writer guy must have eaten Aonuma's lunch someday or something. So, yeah, there is a lot of problems with this game's story. I don't want to just outright replace Tears of the Kingdom story with a different story. If I were to do that, then I might as well just slap the story on a different Zelda game as well. However, I still think a lot of the story they wrote can still be salvaged. I mean, too late now, the game's already out. But at the very least, if I do a good job, we can point at Nintendo and laugh at how a 17-year-old was better at making a story for Tears of the Kingdom than they were. And if you do end up thinking that I somehow managed to do a better job than the clowns at Nintendo, then subscribing would be a great way to applaud my greatness. Anyways, here's how we're going to do this. First and foremost, even though most of the game can be played in any order, the story should still be, somehow, told in one definitive linear order, aside from region-specific subplots, of course. Additionally, the big important flashback cutscenes should all be presented during the main quest, instead of being given its own entirely separate quest. I'll also be making more of the main plot take place in present day, and have more things happen now, with there being less emphasis on the stuff in the past. The plot stuff taking place in the present would include Ganondorf actively rising in power and threat level, ending in an actual story climax, instead of just going and finding him in his lair or whatever. As for lore stuff, I want to try and make the game much less derivative of other Zelda games, since not only does it feature a lot of frequently used Zelda tropes like the discovery of new sages and the stealing of a demon, it also repeats Ganondorf's entire origin story, and it copy and pastes a ton of elements from Breath of the Wild. As I said in a recent video, a good way to keep from being derivative of other Zelda game stories is to build off of their stories instead. So we'll be including a lot more connections to Wild's story. Tears is meant to be a sequel to that game after all, and it's ridiculous how little it acknowledges its predecessor. Especially since Calamity Ganon supposedly came from the Demon King's power leaking from his heel, which was already worse than the explanation we had in Breath of the Wild that somehow Ganondorf devolved into this thing over time, which was a super cool concept. Now sure, they want Tears of the Kingdom to work for new players who haven't played Breath of the Wild. But with all the long exposition scenes they laid out about the Imprisoning War, I think they can spare some time to explain some stuff about the Calamity as well. Plus, Breath of the Wild sold 30 million copies, and I'm guessing most of the player base who care about the story would at least know of the Calamity before buying Tears. As for connections to the rest of the series, I respect the Wild Era's games' decision not to get involved with the timeline, despite it often being derivative of older games as well, but I will try to remove all the contradictions to the greater Zelda timeline. This game can still do its own thing, it's definitely better for them, but in a way that it still doesn't actively fight against the rest of the series in order to both keep the lore fanatics happy and to keep this game from repeating older games' plot points in the process of contradicting them. Because when you're contradicting what happens in older games, it's often what you're doing. You're doing the stuff that they did again, and in the process, you're making it so it kind of happened the first time. But the real bad part is that you're just doing the old thing again. Oh, and one more thing. Bloom goes bye-bye. It's being replaced with Malice again. This game's Malice can be presented as a more concentrated form of the substance, which is basically what Bloom is anyway. That way they can explain the permanent heart removal and their change from the goop lying on top of the ground to being a texture blended into it, which I do understand they need to do that for hardware reasons. Anyways, let us begin. Link and Zelda are exploring the tunnels beneath Hyrule Castle just as before, as they've noticed a strange buildup of malice down there. After walking for a while, Zelda finds the murals depicting Ganondorf's rise to power. However, instead of being known as the Imprisoning War, Zelda will cite these events as the first Great Calamity, one which took place even earlier than the Calamity which happened 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild. According to legend, instead of attacking as a giant primal monster, the Calamity took the form of a man, known as the Demon King. Once they reach the imprisoning chamber, they'll find Ganondorf's mummified body being suspended in place by Raru's hand. They arrive at Ganondorf's body, and the whole awakening cutscene mostly happens the same, but with a few added details. 1. Raru's hand seems to be pushed off of Ganondorf's body by dark magic instead of just falling off, as if Ganondorf's finally gained the power to overpower Raru's seal. And 2. Ganondorf seems a bit delirious when he wakes up, as if he feels uncomfortable being in a physical form like this again. Other than that, this cutscene goes along the same way as the original, along with the rest of the prologue on the Great Sky Island. Things change a bit again once you get to land. The shrines in the sky are still Zonai shrines, however, the ones on the surface are Sheikah shrines again. Though the old ones have disappeared and a new set of shrines have reappeared to their new locations in Tears. Purah mentions that all the Sheikah tech just sort of went away after Ganon's defeat, but that these new shrines appeared during the upheaval, possibly reacting to all the dark magic suddenly returning. After you tell Purah everything, she offers a theory that the man you found underground may have had a connection to Ganon, since they both came from Hyrule Castle and both used the same kind of malice. Then, instead of being explained as regional phenomena, Purah tells you that reports have said that the 4 regions have been targeted by dark magic during the upheaval, which has been causing chaos in each of the regions. She thinks that there's a reason they're being targeted, so Link is sent to investigate, with some hopes that this might lead them to Princess Zelda. For the subplots of the 4 regions, the Zelda sightings will be removed from both Hebra and Gerudo Desert. She'll still be spotted sending a monster after King Dorephan in the Lanayru subplot, and of course she'll still be doing all that drug lord stuff up on Death Mountain, along with all of her other appearances outside the regional phenomena, like telling people to stay away from the rings that fell onto Kakarika Village. She doesn't really do anything important in the Hebra and Gerudo regions other than be mysterious. And her presence starts to get repetitive after seeing her be mysterious in all 4 regions, and nothing else. Cutting it down to just the 2 regions makes more sense, since the people who do Death Mountain first could think that Zelda was just the Goma in disguise, and then realize the expansion of the issue when they reach Lanayru, and those who started Lanayru could see Zelda's apparent treachery as a weird minor event, before seeing the true widespread of her deceit at Death Mountain. As for what the other subplots will have instead, Hebra can just focus a little more on the Stormwind Arc myth, but Gerudo Desert should definitely have some stuff about their old tradition about the male Gerudo becoming the king, since it leads into the Ganondorf stuff. Hopefully also including a mention about how the rule of male Gerudos becoming king was thrown out after the last male Gerudo nearly destroyed the world. Maybe even the Lightning Temple could have been a temple to Ganondorf or something. They don't really acknowledge Ganondorf's connection with the Gerudo nearly as much as they should have in Tears of the Kingdom. And, you know, considering the fact that in older games, Gerudo's whole deal was that they're where Ganondorf comes from, in this game, Ganondorf doesn't even need to be a Gerudo aside from consistency with the other games, so I feel like given more plot and story relevance between the connection with the Gerudo and Ganondorf just makes so much more sense. As for the Sage cutscenes, they'll keep the stuff about being ancestors of your partner and being told by Zelda to fight alongside Link to stop this guy called the Demon King, but nothing else. But they will each show you the memories. Here's how we'll be doing memories here. Dragon Tears are being removed, and all the memories will be shown to you at key points in the game's progression instead, either by one of the sages or explained as Zelda trying to telepathically communicate with you from somewhere. Tier Memories 1 and 2 will be combined into one memory, and they'll be shown to you while you're on your way to Hyrule Castle to talk to the search party. Or if you ignore that quest and go straight into the wilderness, then they'll appear to you once you get far enough away. Then the first sage you visit, whomever that may be, will show you Tier Memory number 3 in order to help you find Zelda, and the second stage you visit, likewise, will show you Tier Memory number 6 for the same reasons. Then the third and fourth stages will show you Tier Memories 4 and 5, respectively, in order to help you learn about the Demon King. Also, yes, Tier Memory 6 is being moved up to before 4 and 5, so that the introduction of the Demon King gets told in the latter half of the sage quest, and the first half can be about Zelda. I feel like it's better to collapse them into one specific part instead of like spreading them out like that. I feel like it's weird. Then, after you beat Phantom Ganon and join up with the sages, instead of Ganondorf showing you this weird vision of his conquest, he'll be showing you memories number 7 and number 8, which will also be combined. Then, when you go to the Zonai Ruins at Dragon Head and unlock the Sky Islands, you'll see Tier Memory number 9, and when you unlock the Construct Factory, you'll see Tier Memory number 10. Then, freeing Minoru will show you the same cutscene as in the original game, where she explains the underground murals, shows you Ganondorf's imprisonment, and then Zelda choosing to eat the Secret Stone to get the Master Sword back to you. The cutscene of her receiving the Master Sword will get skipped in the required cutscene order. However, if you go back to the Zonai Temple of Time after unlocking Minoru, then it will show you the full Tier Memory number 11. After unlocking the 5th stage, Purr sends you to find the Deku Tree in order to locate the Master Sword. In the original game, the Deku Tree gives you a memory of you and Zelda visiting him, and he tells you about the Master Sword's ability to regenerate, but that'll get cut out. It feels unnatural. The Master Sword's ability to regenerate can be told to you by Purr instead. Instead, after the Deku Tree starts tracking the Master Sword for you, the Light Dragon will send you one last vision of memory number 12, showing Zelda's reconfication. Also, the Deku Tree won't show you memory number 12 or the Master Sword until you unlock Minoru. Now for the changes to the memories themselves. For starters, it will be said that Rauru and Sonia are the rebuilders of Hyrule rather than its founders, and that it had existed once in an age long past, but had fallen into disarray and ruins once the Zonai had arrived. Rauru had chosen to pick up the pieces and return the land to its former glory. Then for Ganondorf, instead of Rauru mentioning how a male Gerudo is only born every 100 years, which will instead be brought up in the Gerudo region subplot, he'll instead mention how apparently Ganondorf appeared out of nowhere after decades without there being any male Gerudo, in order to claim his throne. Where he came from, whether he's the same Ganondorf from before, how he got back, and whether he was resurrected recently, reincarnated secretly, or somehow been alive all this time is left up to mystery. These changes will remove contradictions and give timeline theorists some wiggle room for Tears of the Kingdom, while also keeping this game's lore self-contained, unrestricted, and interesting. Probably more interesting, actually, since Ganondorf's mysterious appearance among the Gerudo is definitely cooler than him just being born again. And I feel like the whole founding of Hyrule idea was kind of a swing and a miss anyway. And it would probably be more well received if it was moved out of the territory of the other Zelda games. Then there will be the changes made for this event to be considered the First Great Calamity instead of the Imprisoning War. When Ganondorf gets the Secret Stone, Zelda will get PTSD flashbacks of Calamity Ganon, and realize that this is the First Great Calamity she saw in the murals. She also might mention the Calamity to Rauru when she hears the similarity between Ganondorf's name and Calamity Ganon, though she'll probably dismiss it as a coincidence despite her worries. Then, also a big change I want to make is to the Sonia betrayal cutscene. It always bugged me how this was meant to be their catching Ganondorf in the act moment, but then it got foiled by Ganondorf inexplicably appearing behind Sonia somehow, even though the Zelda puppet was meant to be his infiltration plan to get close, and I don't even think he himself would have had access to the castle. I think it'd be better if there was at least a fight scene or something, and Ganondorf didn't just outsmart them by simply being behind Sonia somehow. Even if Ganondorf could get into the castle, that's still a lame way for him to win. Then also, a slight change I want to make to Ganondorf's character. I don't want his deal to just be Ganondorf wants power. He is evil because he is evil. It's just too blatant. There's plenty of instances of villains out there who have no sympathies or understandable motivations that were handled much better than this, including some other versions of Ganon. Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom still isn't as blatant as Ocarina of Time's Ganondorf, who literally makes Evil King his official title and wears that title proudly. Don't know who thought that was a good idea, but it's still pretty bad. Just shift the dialogue around a bit so that no one calls him evil directly, and so that Ganondorf's lust for power isn't showcased as bare as his chest is. He can still be pure evil, just don't shove that evilness down our throat without giving him any other characterization. Then, 2 more memory changes to the memories involving Raru's seal. First, the ability for a Secret Stone wielder to sacrifice themselves in order to keep another in suspended animation for thousands of years will be mentioned by Minoru alongside Reconification, though she'll dismiss that as a possibility even faster than she dismisses the possibility of Zelda using Reconification, saying how it's more of a desperate combat maneuver than anything else. Then, when Raru does use that technique on Ganondorf, Ganondorf will mention how the seal will not be able to contain his hatred or his raw power, or his angry spirit, and that he will still plague the surface world through this leaking power for millennia, before then mentioning how he'll eventually break from the seal and Raru will only blaze the inevitable, and the whole rest of the scene goes on. Now then, that's all I'll be presenting and changing the memories. But what about the stuff that happens in the modern day? Ganondorf really just spends the whole game vibing underground, causing blood moons and cosplaying as Zelda. We're led to believe that he's gaining strength down there, and eventually he would have risen from Gloom's lair and invaded Hyrule, but that never actually happens. We just fight him in his cave, and then he turns into a dragon when he loses. It'd be much better for story tension and for motivating the players if he actually did try to invade and there was an actual climax. So then, to start, remove the ability to go straight to Ganondorf. It makes much less sense in this game than in Breath of the Wild anyway, especially since you don't even know where Ganondorf is, unlike the Calamity being in Hyrule Castle. I feel like they only included that in this game because that was included in the original Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom isn't really designed around that like Breath of the Wild is. The path to Gloom's lair is still there in the depths beneath Hyrule Castle, but there's a ton of extra thick malice layered on top of it, and you can't enter until you get the 5 sages, the Master Sword, and the location of his lair from the Yiga clan. Then, for the rising action, every time you beat a temple, a blood moon occurs that night. Except this blood moon doesn't just respawn monsters, it increases their numbers, implying that the Demon King's getting stronger and building up his army more. Then, after you beat Phantom Ganon in Hyrule Castle and see the vision of the Demon King's takeover, a large invasion force will come out of the pit beneath Hyrule Castle and head straight for Lookout Landing, meaning you will need to actually defend it from an attack by Ganondorf. Another blood moon will happen after finishing the Spirit Temple, of course, though this one will actually increase the numbers of monsters by even more, and it will worry all the NPCs greatly that the Demon King's invasion is imminent. Then, once you do learn the location of the Demon King's lair, and get the Master Sword and the sages, and arrive at the Malice Barrier above Gloom's lair, the barrier will fade away as a huge invasion force of monsters emerges, along with a large stream of malice that fly out to different locations all across the map that spawn in more monsters and attack many of the different regions and towns all across Hyrule. As you're looking at the surface of Hyrule through the invasion cutscene, you'll also see that the Blood Moon seems to have permanently risen. You're forced to do the Demon King's army fight here above Gloom's lair instead of in the actual cave network right before Ganondorf. And once that is finished, the sages all say that they'll defend Hyrule and that you need to go fight Ganondorf, saying that they'll head down there and join up with you when they can. You can then do all of Gloom's Lair without much change except for the fact that the Demon King's army fight is gone, since you already did that in the depths above. And then the Ganondorf fight is also pretty much the same, with the sages still arriving to help during Phase 2 like in the original. When Ganondorf turns into the Demon Dragon, he resembles the serpent form of Calamity Ganon a lot more closely, with more gaseous malice floating around his body. During the dragon fight, you can see a lot more fighting happening down on the surface of Hyrule, as the armies of the kingdom rise up to do their best to stop the Demon King's forces from advancing. The rest of the finale goes on about the same as it does in the original, since, let's be real, Tears of the Kingdom has a killer ending. And that is how I would fix Tears of the Kingdom story. I hope you think my revision would work well, because if not, then I've embarrassed myself on the internet, and I can't make fun of Nintendo for doing a better job than them somehow. But if you think my fix is actually good, then I would like to remind you that a subscription would be 110% be appreciated. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, and I'm going to go back to sitting on my bed waiting for the next top-down Zelda game to finally arrive, because let's be real, those are what really slap. And it has been 10 years.